Early in the offseason around the National Football League, there was a ton of news on a Wednesday, the day after tag deadline day. I think that thing is hot. I think that thing is on. DRS, we expected some news ahead of the franchise tag window coming to a close on Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern time. But 1 week away from the official start of the league year, that's next Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern around the NFL. Everybody in action yesterday in the National Football League. Let's start with a big trade request out of Seattle. After 6 years, all 6 years of his NFL career with the Seahawks, DK Metcalf wants out, requesting a trade from the Hawks yesterday. Again, a second-round pick way back in 2019. He spent all 6 years of his NFL career with Seattle, 100-plus targets, 900-plus receiving yards in all 6 seasons, but now is looking for greener pastures somewhere else. DK Metcalf wants to be on the move, trying to leave Seattle.
Yeah, and it looks like now the new MO, which, the salary cap goes up every year. A lot of people have a lot of money to spend, so it's very rare that some of these really good players ever just reach true free agency. So the new free agency now is, hey, I'm a great player. I'm just going to force a trade, and yes, compensation will be handled, but I'll still get my money on a new team and force my way somewhere else. And teams usually will say, you know what? What's in the best interest of our team right now? Is it having DK Metcalf at $30 million a year? Is it having DK Metcalf upset that he's not getting paid? Or is it, let's move on, get a first-round pick, and reestablish and go on the next run over the next 3 to 4 years and rebuild this franchise? But for me, this is big news around the NFL because, as I just said, teams have a lot of money to spend. There are teams like the New England Patriots picking up the phone on A.J. Brown saying, we are dying for a number one. And other number ones hear that and say, well, maybe a franchise on the come-up. I'll get 15 targets a game. I'll be paid as one of the highest paid players in the NFL. You know what? Maybe the grass is greener on the other side. But for DK Metcalf, this isn't like, hey, an aging veteran on the move. This is a guy in his prime that will be a difference maker on a team that needs a wide receiver. He could strike gold here, forcing this trade.
He is in his mid-20s. He still has a lot of football left to go. And, Donnie, we have played front office exec around the NFL this offseason and last offseason. And with that escalating salary cap, always, DK Metcalf signed a contract extension after his rookie deal was coming to a close with the Seahawks way back in the 2022 offseason, now nearly 4 years ago, for $24 million. Pretty good payday at the time. But there are 6 wide receivers around the National Football League at this current juncture that make at least $30 million per year. All 6 of those guys have signed said extension in the last 2 off seasons. Very similar story for the quarterback market as well. All 9 QBs currently making $50+ million per year signed those new deals in the last 2 off seasons. That is where the inflated value of these positional groups is going. So DK Metcalf looking around the NFL being like, I'm only getting $24 million. I'm not all that happy with the direction of this Seattle team. The Seahawks might be in for a small rebuild in year number 2 under Mike Macdonald. DK Metcalf trying to get his way out. And again, you saw the stats from a season ago. 66 grabs, nearly 1,000 receiving yards, coming up 8 yards shy, and 5 touchdowns. In all 6 years with Seattle, at least 900 receiving yards. And Donnie, based on reports, there is a lot of interest around the NFL for DK Metcalf. And of course, a team to pay attention to, that would be the Green Bay Packers. But you need to trade for DK Metcalf, so Seattle has to recoup some draft assets, and then more than likely, you're going to have to rework a contract extension with DK Metcalf, who is coming up on the final year of his deal in 2025.
That's the tough part about it, because you're not just drafting the wide receiver like, hey, he's fantastic, we're going to pay him a certain amount over the next 3 years, then probably have to negotiate. You're going to pay this guy at the top of the market and give up top-level compensation, which is why you see Seattle, swinging for the fence. Hey, if this is going to be a trade, we want a 1 and a 3 back. They're not going to get a 1 and a 3 back when you have to pay a guy $30 million a year. You should have to offset it, which is why we see some of these trades going like, wow, Debo went for a 5th or 6th round draft pick, but you have to pay the guy $21 million a year. That's why. If Debo made $1.2 million a year, Debo would have went for a 1st round draft pick at that point. Yeah. So those are some of the things you have to have. Maybe common sense will prevail. Should he get a number 1 for DK Metcalf? Probably, but you're not getting like a number one from like a top 10 pick there. You'd get the number one from a team that, like the Green Bay Packers, making the playoffs, drafting in the 20s. That's what makes some sense. But I don't think they're getting a 1 and a 3 and DK breaking the bank at the same time. So those teams are going to have to work some deals out. But if DK is unhappy, that's the last thing you want for a Seattle franchise. You're not supposed to be Super Bowl champions, but you want your best players in the building. But the last thing you want is, hey, man, this guy's not even showing up in OTAs because he's so angry at us. That just never works out.
Geno Smith brought back on an extension now 2 off seasons ago. Both of his top targets outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba now looking for a new home. DK Metcalf seeking a trade. Tyler Lockett, after a decade in the Northwest, released yesterday as well by the Seahawks. Somebody who is not going anywhere, at least for the foreseeable future. That's Max Crosby in Sin City. A new regime for the Raiders, led by Pete Carroll and John Spytek. Not a lot of talent on the roster, so your most talented player, got to keep him in-house. The Raiders do, with a large payday for Max Crosby. 3-year, $106.5 million deal. That is $35.5 million annually, DRS, making Max Crosby now the highest paid non-QB in NFL history.
Max Crosby is great. Max Crosby was probably due for an extension. Max Crosby is one of the best defensive pass rushers. That is a premium position. Nobody looks at that contract and says that's ridiculous, because it's not. I just think it's ridiculous that the Raiders have paid out that contract when they were so talent depleted. And again, I just said, like, they need to spend money. There is a floor in the salary cap in the NFL they have to spend up to. But I don't know if the assets go the right direction, because I think they should be rebuilding. So if you pay this money and say, hey, what's our production back? Let's just say Max gets 17 sacks next year. Donnie, that's money well spent. And the Raiders still win 5 games. Was it money well spent, or should you have gotten 2 first-round picks back for Max Crosby, which absolutely would be the going rate?
Yeah, no doubt about it, DRS. I do understand the point. I think you are trying to make him the cornerstone of this rebuild, to have that stable floor, and a guy that has been there for all 6 years in Las Vegas, being that face of the franchise. Max Crosby has been that. He only played in 12 games this year. In his first 5 years with the Raiders, played in every single game. Still at 7.5 sacks this season, 105 tackles for loss since he joined the Raiders back in 2019. More on the early line next. A busy day early in the NFL offseason, now less than a week away from the official start of the league year. That is 4 p.m. Eastern time this upcoming Wednesday. DRS, just one more point on Max Crosby. 105 tackles for loss since he joined the NFL, his rookie campaign in 2019. That is best around the National Football League. He gets his money, as does another defensive player yesterday. Zach Bond in Philadelphia. A 3-year, $51 million deal. That is $17 million per season. 4th highest paid linebacker in the NFL, which he is very deserving of after his first year with the Eagles, an AP first team All-Pro. DRS, his first true year as a starting defensive player, made 16 in the regular season for Philly in 2024. Had an interception during Super Bowl 59. He had only made 14 starts in his first 4 years in the NFL, primarily a special teamer in New Orleans. So he is rewarded after a career year. For the guy you called the Bald Eagle, is that his nickname? That's incredible.
That's the Bald Eagle. That is the Bald Eagle. He's back in Philadelphia. Times have changed. The Eagles paying top dollar for linebackers. The Eagles paying a running back in the offseason top dollar, then giving him the most top dollars that you can get. I don't know what's going on with Howie Roseman, how he affords her to get it done, but Zach Bond absolutely needed to be back, because understand this. There's the thought process, oh, they found Zach Bond. He can leave. They'll find somebody else again. But when you find somebody who turns out to be the best middle linebacker in football, do you just pass it along and say, no, like, this guy means a lot to our locker room. It's a big deal of why we have the best defense in football. And Vic Fangio absolutely loves him being the quarterback of the defense. It made too much sense. And also credit this from the Eagles and Bond's perspective. They probably did a lot of work at the combine figuring out what that structure was. But the last thing you want to do is say, hey, kid, go test the free agent market and come back to us, because you never know what that price point actually might turn out to be. I think they were both happy with this deal, and Zach Bond back in Philadelphia is a big deal to that defense moving forward.
You might be asking, how can the Eagles do this? They are paying everybody. They don't have the cap space. They don't have the funds to also pay the defensive side of the football. I'm not sure I have an answer, but somehow, some way, it is working out with the financial backing of owner Jeffrey Lurie and the financial wizardry of Howie Roseman. The Chargers cutting Joey Bosa, who has been a part of this Bolts organization for 9 seasons. 3rd overall pick by the San Diego Chargers back in the 2016 NFL Draft, has spent 9 years with the Bolts, was a 5-time Pro Bowler, including this past season. 14 games played this year, DRS, only 14 the 2 years prior. But the former AP Defensive Rookie of the Year back in 2016, after 9 years with the Chargers, looking for a new home.
Yeah, he's going to get a pretty good payday, too, because as you said, banged up with the injuries, but when he is on the field, he is a difference maker at a premium position. And if he does head up north, look, is that new slogan for the 49ers? Make the 49ers great again? Could be. He could add to that team, Ben. He could do it. He could.
How long you been waiting on that?
I was waiting for since the opening. I was like, when can I bust
Good.
that one out where I know Ben will get a kick out of that? So I thought that was the perfect time. We didn't want to waste it. And again, with no audio, we waited for audio. Now we're back in business.
You would certainly think that Nick and Joey Bosa would be doing that together and having a lot of fun. The San Francisco 49ers are apparently a front runner to add Joey Bosa, the brother of Nick. We talked about Tyler Lockett being released by the Seattle Seahawks after a decade in Seattle. AP first-team All-Pro. His rookie season now 10 years ago with the Seahawks. Still very productive, although not really the lead guy. Jackson Smith and Jigba now looking around the wide receiver room like, where are all my friends?
By the way, he felt like he was the guy, though, Ben, in the second half of the season as the true number one on that team. That's who they like to go to. But by the way, if anybody doesn't know, and they should know, like Tyler Lockett, 10 years, there was a time in the NFL where you couldn't cover that guy when Russell Wilson was the quarterback. So this guy's put in a lot of work. He'll be a good veteran on another team, but big shakeup on one of the better wide receiving cores in the NFL.
No doubt about it. The Seahawks clearing house except for JSN. And after 7 years, all in Cincinnati, Sam Hubbard retiring from football. The Cincinnati kid, a Cincy native who played his college ball in the state in Columbus at Ohio State, calls it a career after 7 seasons.
Kid probably played all throughout his life. That's 4 years in high school. That's 4 years in college and 7 in the NFL. It's like, oh, he's only 29. That's a lot of football, man. Come on.
A lot of football. The Cowboys converting some of Dak Prescott's base salary to a signing bonus, freeing up in the past 48 hours more than $56 million. The Cowboys, big spenders? We'll see. We were expecting our first guest of the day being Mark Zinno. We believe he is here, but experiencing technical difficulties at this moment. So we hope he can join us very, very shortly. I believe Mark is here. I actually have no idea now.
Yes.
When the bit becomes reality, DRS. When the bit becomes reality.
Ice cream on me.
Zinno, a man that is always professional and very on time. Thanks for joining us here on this Thursday on the Early Line.
Always great to be with you guys. As long as I keep you guessing on your toes and just keep the levity throughout this program, that's what I'm here for each and every week.
Reliability, Mark. Availability. The best abilities out there, my friend, and don't you ever forget it. We will start with a football focus early in the offseason around the National Football League. We'll talk some college basketball with Mark Zinno, as well as we are now in the month of March. I've got an idea. I've got a good joke I'll share with you guys at the break. Anyway, let's start with the quarterback market, Mark, in terms of NFL free agency. Not many quarterbacks that are all that robust in this free agent class. But of course, we'll start with one that is always very notable. After being released by the New York Jets over a week ago, Aaron Rodgers has his football future ahead. At the end of 20 years in the NFL, at the age of 41, does he still want to play football? All indications are yes, Mark. So then the question for you is, what are some possible landing spots for Rodgers?
Would it be crazy if he did the same thing Brett Favre did and ended up in Minnesota for a year? I mean, in reality, A.J. McCarthy is still probably not anywhere closer to playing professional football than he was at this point in time last year, given the injury that he had. So Sure, you could sit there and watch and learn and everything else, but he hadn't had a year's full of practice and reps and everything else. But you're also going to a team in Minnesota that's got a lot of offensive weapons, that's got some stability at the coaching position. And, oh, by the way, for Aaron Rodgers, rather, who may have a little level of pettiness in him, wouldn't he love to go back and stick it to the Packers within his own division? I mean, he's probably only got one more year left in this thing. There's a world where I could see him ending up in Minnesota because clearly if Minnesota was committed to Sam Darnold at this point, they would have done a deal with him. Like, I don't think they've closed the door completely, but they've also turned around and said, look, if somebody else wants to pay him top dollar, we're just not going to go there. They didn't go there with Kirk Cousins again the second time. There was no reason to go there again with Sam Darnold, who has a much less proven track record. So the Vikings have an open door here. I think that they would evaluate Rodgers, look at him, and for the most part, again, given everything that Minnesota has and the scheme that they run, Rodgers could be pretty successful there.
When you take a look also with Aaron Rodgers, like the baggage comes with him. We thought it was going to work out in New York. It was dramatically bad. And obviously the first year there in New York wasn't his fault, gets injured a couple plays into the season. Second year actually puts up decent statistics, but the team didn't rally around him. So moving on, let's just say Marquis picks his new team. Contract expectations. He's made more money than just about every other NFL player in the history of the sport. Is this one where he goes, I want to prove you wrong, 1 year, $5 million? Or does he go, sure, I'll play for you, but let's roll out the carpet with $40+ million a year, which is what my expectations are?
I mean, I don't think you have to pay him as low as $5 million, but if you gave him 20, which is very low for any starting quarterback in this league. I mean, there are backups making 10 for crying out loud. So if you went in there at 18 to 20 million for a 1 year deal, I don't think Rodgers would turn it down. I mean, listen, for all of Aaron Rodgers' flaws, I don't think he's stupid. I don't think he's not aware of where he is at this point in his playing career. I think he understands what he is and where he is and what he's going to be worth. So it will be a 1 year show me deal, but at the rate of around 18 to 20 million. I don't think he would ever take less than that. There would be no reason for him to. I mean, there's no reason to take backup money unless he's actually going to be a backup, but I don't think that's going to be a scenario.
Yeah, we'll see exactly what Aaron Rodgers decides. We'll see his investment into football. There is still the potential of a retirement. You never know exactly what Rodgers will do in this offseason. Some potential suitors out there. My biggest question, does he want to be in a quarterback battle? Is he going to be able to be named the number one based on the level of play we have seen out of Rodgers the last season, plus even his final year in Green Bay in 2022? Let's talk about Minnesota. You mentioned that as a potential landing spot for Aaron Rodgers. Sam Darnold was the guy there this past year, but the face of the franchise moving forward is certainly J.J. McCarthy. Sam Darnold was not placed under the franchise tag, by the Vikings earlier this week, meaning he is fully a free agent. We can talk about how much in just a moment. First question is where? Where do you believe Sam Darnold is playing his NFL football in 2025?
Whoever the last person is without a chair is where Sam Darnold will end up. I mean, I just think everybody understands that the final two games that we saw, the most important two games that we saw from Sam Darnold, was the Jets version of Sam Darnold who showed up. And that should scare the hell out of any GM who's looking to put him onto some sort of deal here. And again, I don't think if you're signing Sam Darnold, it's for more than 2 years anyway. Like at this point, there's no reason, not enough track record to believe that his investment is going to be worthwhile. Like that's just the reality. And again, you can take that as a knock on Sam Darnold, but there's a lot more proof of bad throughout his career than there is the 16 games of good that he gave you in a Vikings uniform. So, and look, the Vikings are kind of wise. Didn't they live that existence already with Case Keenum for 1 year where they had a fantastic year and then all of a sudden they said, you know what, hey, we're not going to go in this direction again. So I would trust the Vikings' judgment here on this one. I don't know where he plays. I think genuinely whoever is left without a seat at the table when the music stops is going to turn to Sam Darnold and go, here's a 2 year deal, come play quarterback for us kind of deal.
Yeah, here's the interesting thing, too, about Darnold is it's not as if, like, with the arguments were like, well, how can you get Stafford? He's 37 years old, going to be 38 years old. How is that actually going to play out? Like, he's still in his prime and played good football last year until those final two games, Mark, because I always said, imagine if he would have beat Detroit or won a playoff game. There's a real argument that Minnesota's getting rid of J.J. McCarthy, but due to those two games, which were the biggest games, it's not there. Oakland makes a little bit of sense to me, but is there a contender? When I say contender, obviously I don't mean like the Philadelphia Eagles or the Kansas City Chiefs. Who could you see him fitting on that football team, giving them a chance to say, okay, We might not be a playoff team now, but if we get Darnold playing good football, we can be that playoff team and where he fits in.
I mean, it's tough to say. Like, New Orleans comes to mind a little bit. Like, if they were willing to move off Derek Carr, could Indianapolis work out if they're not 100% sold on Anthony Richardson? Like, does that feel like if I'm the Raiders, I don't want to go in that direction. I want some semblance of stability going forward. I don't think that's exactly what they're looking for. I mean, again, it's like you look around the landscape of teams that are there. It's really hard to. I mean, could Cleveland go in the Sam Darnold direction if they could afford to make it work, given the amount of money they'll have tied up in Deshaun Watson? All these questions are out there. I think whatever it boils down to, he's going to be at the back of the line when it comes to addressing the quarterback position. I don't think anybody's rushing to the front to go get him.
So I don't know exactly if I agree with that, because I do believe Sam Darnold does not elevate a ceiling of a franchise, but I do believe there will be teams that go out there and pay for him. The Las Vegas Raiders would certainly – go ahead.
I was going to say, there's one more that kind of makes sense, right? Like, here's the thing. If the Tennessee Titans were going to either draft a quarterback or even forego it and go take Abdul Carter, would it make sense to bring Sam Darnold in and bring some stability? Yeah, I think that's a situation that could work for a year or two until they figure out exactly what they want to do. Because, look, it doesn't matter what quarterback they draft. It doesn't matter who they draft. Guess what? I can tell you, Tennessee's not going to the playoffs next year. So whatever they do for this draft and whatever they do this year is not going to have any net outcome being one step closer to being in the playoffs. They're still 2 or 3 years away.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I still think the Titans will look to draft a quarterback with that number 1 overall pick. If they do not and they trade out, then Sam Darnold becomes a part of it. But we'll know very quickly if Tennessee makes a move on Darnold what their plans are for the first overall pick, as that legal tampering window does begin on Monday afternoon. Sam Darnold's not going to make a mediocre team a playoff contender, a playoff team into a conference championship frontrunner. Can he provide a stable footing for a team that needs it, like the Raiders? Perhaps. Can he be that guy in Indianapolis to challenge Anthony Richardson? Perhaps. That we shall see.